Good afternoon, welcome to the studio. Today Sarah is joining us and she's going to be talking about British Sign Language and why it's important to her and to everybody else. But first of all, just to say a little bit about hearing loss. It's quite common, especially as people get older, and sometimes other illnesses and injuries can cause premature hearing loss. How does hearing work? Well, this I have to read to you because I'm not quite sure I fully understand it. But apparently sound waves enter the outer ear and travel through a narrow passageway called the ear canal. And this leads to the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates from the incoming sound waves and sends these vibrations to 3 tiny bones in the middle ear. Now that's important because I think it just very, very briefly explains how complex hearing is. You know, that those vibrations and those tiny little bones working together is how we can hear the noises around us. And the inner ear is quite delicate, so we have to try and protect it a little bit more than things maybe outside of the body, because it can be damaged quite easily. But sometimes hearing loss does occur and it's not avoidable. Lots of people are born without hearing, so born deaf, and develop conditions later on in life. So myself, I was 6 when I heard the phone ring, and I picked it up, put it to my ear, and I couldn't hear anything. So at this point, being 6, obviously I shouldn't be answering the phone anyway, and my mum came over and took the phone off of me, and she could hear my nan on the other side, and she gave it back to me. She said, "It's your nan." So I switched over to this ear and I could hear her fine, and that's when we realised that I'd lost hearing in this ear, and it happened pretty much overnight and due to a childhood illness. So it does happen, it's quite common, but I think really one-sided hearing loss is probably a little easier to cope with. You can still hear some things, it's just if somebody comes on this side of me, it's not always that easy to hear them. People can sneak up on me like ninjas quite easily, and when it's very, very noisy, I find that a little bit difficult. So hearing is quite important, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so tell us about what you'll be doing and why.
Okay, so if I may, I'll start with mentioning that the past year and a half for me has been completely shaken up. I've been through a lot of changes in my life, and coming out of those, I sort of began to wonder where God might be calling me. And that was a process that I began to go through when I met a very dear friend of mine, Chris, who began coming to my church at St Peter's. And the more that he came along, the more I realised that I felt quite helpless. He was struggling to engage. And, you know, I remember a particular service that he came to, and looking around the room at everyone else being able to engage and he couldn't. That was the night that I went home, sat down in my chair, and I realised that this is something that I feel called to do. So I began the process of enrolling into a British Sign Language course that I start in September, and began working closely with Stephanie Gillingham, who is a deaf minister. She works in many deaf churches around Essex and based in Colchester, and Archdeacon Elizabeth Snowden, who are very kindly supporting me through this 3 years, 3 levels of British Sign Language. The end goal being to work as an interpreter, not just within the parishes here at Livestream Churches, but be movable around the deanery, in the Chelmsford Cathedral, wherever I may be needed.
So this was kind of, like you said, born out of having a friend who's completely deaf, both ears,
Profoundly.
and he came to your service. So this is something you obviously feel passionate about, you recognise the need there.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully Chris has been very helpful in helping me get to where I am at the moment, learning British Sign Language. And the more that I've done that, the more I've been able to become, join deaf communities, go out around other groups and get involved, and see also that there's a need within the church for that. This isn't just me wanting to become an interpreter to help, but also to encourage others. I think that's very important. It's all very well me doing this, but if something happens to me or I'm called to glory, then what will happen?
So it's something that you want to kind of take off,
Yeah.
and so that it can be more inclusive for deaf people in churches. And I know you mentioned that you have been out to deaf communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are deaf churches, although I do feel that there are a lot of people in the deaf community that are unaware of them. That's perhaps something that we can do something about. But there are groups that meet up as well. For an example, yesterday there was a group at Rossi's down Seacon. And that's a good opportunity to get amongst again the deaf culture, the deaf community, and get to know them.
So it's kind of like meeting people who are deaf, who come together because, you know, they can sign and lip read, and not necessarily that would be easily found in other places in society, would you think?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
there's quite a need.
Especially in the church, I find that they can feel like they're perhaps quite segregated, and there's no need for it when we can do something about that.
So other than signing, not every church is going to have somebody who can do that, although the hope is that people will be encouraged by you. So how else can the church and other places support people who are deaf?
I think definitely being mindful of the fact that, you know, someone who is deaf could walk through the church door at any service, and then how are we going to cater for that? You know, it could be as simple as if we've got words on a screen. And also, it would be very helpful for each congregation to perhaps be able to give the piece in British Sign Language and make them feel like they're a part of that, because who are we to separate them?
Okay, so then, if you're okay, can you teach us how to give the piece in
Sure.
sign language?
So, peace of the Lord be with you.
Okay, so let's do that again. Peace of the Lord be with you. So that's something that could easily be learned by people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we've already adopted this at St Peter's, and we take that moment when we're given the peace to also stop for Chris or anyone else who may be deaf, and relying on signing to do that for them.
And I suppose if people have got the ability to use hearing aids, a loop system is a must-have nowadays in most places, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you spoke about not keeping this to yourself. After you having gone through all the levels, and how are you going to be, say for example, I wanted to learn French.
Yeah.
And I got so far and I was a bit confident and I wanted to go to France and practice my French among French people.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to do that?
So as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to also be around those that are deaf and get amongst them, their community, become a part of that. And also, passing that on. And I also have this vision for the future that perhaps I could do some workshops within the church place, teaching everyday language, not necessarily just teaching them written sign language, but just how to hold a general conversation, or the words that we use within the church.
It's like those basics that people can start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's your plans,
Yes.
and obviously it's going to take up quite a lot of your time.
We will be.
How are you going to balance everything?
So last year I went through a big change in my life, and that kind of led me to go back to college. That gave me the strength to stand up and do something for myself, which I've now just completed. And coming out of that, I realised that I do have that time and that space in my life to do something for myself, to better myself, that will also better and help others. So I feel that it's going to fit and work perfectly.
Yeah, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but obviously we're sisters, so I know that you have 2 children with autism.
Yeah.
And as they were growing up, there was a communication barrier at certain points,
Yeah.
and sometimes still is, where children with autism can often use hands instead of
Yeah.
words. And actually I think the school has started teaching small bits of sign language
Yeah.
to help
The
them.
school tend to use Makaton, which is slightly different. But Elijah, my 8-year-old who has autism, does rely on some signs. He's not deaf. He did have some hearing problems at birth due to his cleft lip and palate, but he's hearing. He just relies on that.
So having the spoken word and being able to also sign is also going to be helpful if you're around people with autism who maybe would like that extra option. It's difficult sometimes to put things into words.
Yeah.
So I know that you said this is very important to you, but just so that all of us understand the gravity of the situation, I know you've got some statistics.
Yeah, I mean, I did do a little bit of research into this, and I found it quite striking to know that of 70 million, only 2% follow Christ.
So that's 70 million deaf people.
70 million in the deaf worldwide, only less than 2% know and follow Christ. And I found that quite striking.
So that's quite low, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's 2% of the worldwide people who are deaf
Yeah.
are Christian. And by contrast, if you look it up, you can see around about 31% of the worldwide population
Mm-hmm.
are Christian.
Yeah.
So it's quite significantly lower.
Yeah. I mean, there could be many reasons for it, but perhaps one of those reasons start with us in helping them to not just encourage, but to engage. If someone walks into a church place and they can't engage, then they may well not just come back.
Yes. So the concern is that if you provide ways of people who are deaf to engage with the gospel, with worship, that they may be able to, build up their faith.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming to talk to us. I think it's quite important that we talk about how we can try and preserve some of our hearing, and also to recognise the signs that we might be losing some of the hearing that we have. So if you have hearing loss, one of the first signs of that is that you may struggle to hear people, especially if it's busy and noisy around. And if that happens for a prolonged period of time, it can be quite stressful and draining on your energy, because you're really concentrating and focusing on the person to try and understand what they're saying. And another thing, I think, which maybe other people notice and tell you that you're doing, is you tend to watch the television with a higher volume. Which I think your children do that anyway.
I'm starting to do that.
And volume is not good for your hearing.
No.
So do be careful with, if you're playing music in your ear, don't overdo the volume, because it can damage your hearing, and sometimes the damage can be irreversible. If you are concerned about your hearing, go and see your GP. It's very easy to get referral to ENT, and having your hearing tested is really not scary. I would dare say it's quite fun, actually. Because you get to wear some earphones, and it's just as simple as you've got to press a button every time you hear a bleep.
I've been through it with my two children that were born with cleft lip and palate. They regularly get their ears tested, and they're little children, and they quite enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing to worry about, but always worth checking out if you've got that concern. Some other things you might get ringing in your ears, something called tinnitus, which is like a high-pitched or like a buzzing noise. Not always a serious condition. Sometimes you can have an inner ear infection, and don't ignore it. If you do, go and get the treatment that you need, because we have to look after our ears. They are quite delicate. They're quite amazing, actually. You know, the way that they work. Don't clean your ears out with earbuds. Obviously not. You think of the ear drum as a drum. You know, it's almost. Can you imagine like stabbing through it? It wouldn't be good. If you have hearing loss, tell your friends and family, because they can support you. They can look directly in your face when they're talking to you, which is good, because you know you're being spoken to.
I mean, part of learning British Sign Language isn't just using your hands, it's also your lip pattern and your facial structure. For example, if I'm asking you a question and I'm curious, and I look curious, and they kind of rely on that. It all works together.
Yeah, so sort of compensating for not being able to hear what is said by looking at your body language.
Yeah.
So that's one way that people can adjust the way that they're communicating, even if they can't learn sign language. They can try and make sure that they're expressing something.
Yeah.
I think that's all. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm just very excited going forward, and I hope that you have me back on in about a year's time, and I'll be able to do some more signing and share some more.
Yeah, I think it would be good actually to have you back on, and then you can share some of your sign language, and we can commit to learning some of that as well.
Yeah, and hopefully we can get a group together to learn some day-to-day words.
Yeah, very good. Last week we spoke about pets. I don't know if you caught that. Yeah. And I just wanted to share a couple of sort of funny stories with you that people have sent in. So Sandra the duck fell into her pond when she was very small, and she couldn't get back out. Gordon, her owner, scooped her up, and the bond was made. From this point on, Sandra would follow Gordon around like he was her saviour. So that's lovely, isn't it? Yeah. And the other one, Jaws the cat had a crazy amount of energy. He liked to bolt sporadically from one end of the house to the other, as quickly as possible. Whilst they were redecorating, Jaws' owners put a new glass door up against the wall in the hallway. Jaws darted around the corner and caught the door, and it fell into the banister and shattered. And then Jaws stopped just short of the exit and looked back in shock. So a little bit dramatic there. But pets are really wonderful and they do become a part of the family. So if you have any good stories that you want to share, do send them in. Anything else that you'd like us to talk about here, or if you want to join us, please do get in contact and put comment on Facebook or email us. Tomorrow here at St Sed's we're open from 9. From 10 to 1 we've got Bring Your Own Craft Cafe. So whether that's knitting or needlework or art or anything, lots of art, whatever you like to do, bring it in and you can use the space here. Also, because it does go over lunchtime, if you want to bring your lunch and eat it with other people, that's good as well, isn't it? We've got something quite exciting coming up over the summer. On Saturday, the 20th of August, we've got a Southend City celebration, and everyone is invited. There's going to be lots of great fun activities. We're going to be celebrating all that is good about Southend. So that's multiculturalism in the food. By the way, the food is all free, which is brilliant, isn't it? It's a free event. Lots of entertainment, and also, which I'm really excited about, is a mini carnival parade. So if you have children or you are young at heart, adults as well, and you want to dress up and be part of the parade on the day, then get in contact with us at Livestreams. And just so you know, there will be prizes for first, second and third. So, worthwhile doing and a lot of fun as well, I think. More information to follow for that. On Sunday at 3:30 here at St Sed's, we've got worship. And if you want to sort of keep up with everything that we're doing here and at the Livestreams churches, then do subscribe to our newsletter, which gets sent out every week. Have you subscribed?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's worth doing that because you do get a roundup of everything. So I think that's all for this week. Do keep cool because it is too hot. Keep your pets cool, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.